Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Bob Bailkoski, the Chief Executive of Logicalis, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Denise Lee, Cisco's Vice President of Engineering in the Sustainability Office. Denise is responsible for engineering sustainability into Cisco's solutions and programs. And today, in our discussion, we want to highlight what IT leaders can do to drive carbon reduction through their IT environment and promote the right procurement and circularity practices to reduce the carbon impact of IT. Now, Denise and I met a few years ago and we've discussed sustainability several times. And over the past 2 years, we've seen massive progress in this space. Hi, Denise. Thanks for joining me.
So great to see you again, Bob. Thanks for having me.
So, Denise, let's start by trying to frame the problem, if you like. Can you give our audience some sense of the size of the challenge that we have when we talk about the global carbon footprint of IT?
Absolutely. I think back to all, just this handful of years ago when we met and how much things have truly changed. And back then it was so much about this education and awareness of there is a problem, everyone, there's a problem. Now we know how big the problem is. We're not trying to convince people that there's a problem. In fact, last night in my hometown, we were all without power for 7 hours.
Gosh,
Yeah. Yep. And we're just right here in the middle of Silicon Valley. And so when we look at like the world electricity demand at growing at over 3% over the next 3 years, and then you have these little things like AI consuming even more power, there's rays of hope when the same stats are also showing us from the IEA that renewable power sources are actually growing, and they are going to reach and outpace coal generation just as early as next year. And I think that's one of those big misnomers that we have to keep the facts going, that technology and the progress of what we now know to be a problem, we are trying to figure out what those solutions are. So, again, the ICT industry we know is a massive contributor to power. We know that our grids are vulnerable around the world. And some of these questions that I've been getting from customers more recently are a lot more pragmatic in terms of now let's get to action. What are we going to do about it? So there are questions like, how do I optimize energy for the infrastructure that I'm looking to replace? How am I calculating and how am I reporting emissions? We know that regulations and compliance and reporting are happening at the geo level as well as the global level. Last week was Climate Week in New York City globally. And then there's a lot of questions around, well, this is actually a business problem, right? How can sustainability and sustainable IT actually help us save money? And then how do we as a company, even down to a personal level, how do I influence circularity and a circular economy? And so I remember you in Logicalis were actually far ahead of this. And one of the first times we met, I remember very specifically, I was very new into role, and you were asking, what we need product carbon footprints for Cisco's products. And I remember that so distinctly because I'm like, wow, here's a CEO of one of our big partners asking us, where we think we have, pretty great strategy and a pretty decent plan. We were, the Science-Based Target Initiative had said, yep, Cisco's plan to net zero is stamped, and we're really proud of that. And I said, well, we still have a lot of work to do. And fast forward all these years later, Logicalis is one of the handful of partners in our pilots with our product carbon footprint. So we know customers are starting to ask this of us. I would love to kind of hear from your side. What are you seeing?
Let me first say thank you for giving us access to that data. I know it was a hard job on your side. There's a lot of hard yards done to first of all understand and then make available that data. So we really appreciate it. It's a critical part of our conversations with our customers, and those conversations, those questions that you're getting from your customers, we're having the same conversations all the time, with our clients all around the world. Everyone is looking for reliable data to inform their sustainability decision making, if you like. And I think that's the very first step in taking action. determining what your footprint is today. In fact, because of the work that Cisco have done to provide that product carbon footprint data to environmentally specialized partners like Logicalis, like ourselves, we've been able to create a data-driven customer journey towards sustainable IT. And what I love about this data is it provides the carbon footprint, but it also helps size the potential reduction and this is critical, the associated cost savings. So even if you're talking to a climate skeptic, they appreciate that energy savings equals cost savings, right? And so therefore, organizationally, this helps the bottom line. Um, just taking a step back, our goal at Logicalis is in sustainability is twofold. First of all, of course, is to help our clients reduce the carbon in their environment through more power efficient infrastructure. And the second goal that we have is to help them avoid unnecessary electronic waste, which is a growing problem. Researchers forecast that global e-waste will rise to 75 million tons by 2030. And that's, do the maths, it's almost 1.5 million tons a week. And that's virtually double where we're at and the amount of e-waste that was produced back in 2014. So, it's growing at phenomenal rates. There's something we can do about that. And with the ICT sector predicted to account for 14% of global carbon emissions by 2040, it's very clear to me that organizations like Logicalis, like Cisco, we've got a pivotal role to play in driving the best possible outcomes in this area.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The ICT industry is cited often as a role and function within many organizations to sort of lead the change and lead that cause. I think there are recent studies that are showing, close to 40% of organizations are looking to allocate over 10% of their overall ICT budget to sustainability efforts. What's not counted in that we're also starting to see that's really interesting is the ICT or the IT group bringing in their other counterparts in the C-suite. So whether that's facilities or real estate, maybe they're bringing in a chief sustainability officer or procurement, right? Supply chain, like you're mentioning security, you're mentioning circularity. What we're seeing is leadership at the overall leadership level is looking at how to approach these problems more holistically. There is not one customer I've met that has figured out what I'll just simply articulate as their real estate footprint evaluation post-pandemic. How are we doing return to office? How many people are coming into the office? What are we doing to retrofit our offices? And whether that's because of operational, efficiency or overall energy efficiency. I mean, nobody wants to be in a building where you have two people on an entire floor and HVAC's running and the lights are on. It just feels very wasteful. But what we're seeing is for those customers who are looking at improving the building, and Bob, this is where you and I have some brain trust and other conversations with industry leaders, right? How are we looking at spaces to be more agile and modular? Right. So we're not putting holes in walls. We're looking at furniture that is designed for like cameras and hybrid work. From a sustainability angle, how are we making sure the things that we're putting in offices? I've seen really unique things like solar on windows that are directly feeding the blinds that they're connected to, right? Health and wellness. We're starting to see more and more people come into the office expecting health and wellness, especially after COVID. The quality of the air, the temperature, the humidity, the lighting. How productive are you in the office versus at home under the right conditions? And then how are we looking at real estate and digitizing that entire experience? And so when we look at partners like Logicalis helping us to navigate that very broad ecosystem of what it's going to take for organizations to invest in this, in all the various traditional silos, we're coming together with these sort of outcomes, around everything from a good health and wellness perspective to operational IT efficiency. So when we look at how Cisco's looking at this sort of end to end, we look at our buildings sort of fit for purpose, and we're looking at how we embed our goals at the company level into not even everything from our offices to our roadmap. And we have this goal to be 100% to have 100% of our products for all new Cisco products and packaging that are incorporating our circular design practices. And we're doing that by next year. So the good news is we have a good portion of our organization already there designing and building into our actual products. One of the things we don't talk enough about is the fact that Cisco's supply chain is so world-class that 99.98% of all the products we get back, we can actually responsibly recycle and reuse. Right. So we need to work with partners like you to help make sure that this e-waste is coming back into the proper supply chain so that we can do the right refresh and remanufactured programs and use this equipment as long as possible without it landing in a landfill. And when we talked about, well, where do customers start on their journey, we knew that it was really important to get a base level of understanding. Right. One of those core principles in all networking is you can't manage what you can't see. You can't fix what you can't see. And so understanding what energy management means to any given organization, all the way down to the device level, right? I often say, when you were asking about the telemetry data, where you were asking about the product carbon footprint data, telemetry off our devices is owned by Cisco and the customer, and that's it, right? That's the security in networking. And so when we look at energy management and the progress that we've made over the last 18 months, we've identified 5 key energy metrics that we've standardized across Cisco's entire portfolio. And for anyone who's familiar with Cisco's portfolio, it's a pretty big portfolio. And so across all of our controllers and all of our data sources, we have organized and standardized these 5 metrics that help customers pull those levers of energy efficiency, energy management. And so once you can see that, which is that's the first stage, what we're getting ready to do is go beyond just visibility and observability, but get into that insights and analytics so we can start truly doing the control and automation. And from that, having the credibility and the validity of that data in one data foundation allows us to do the kind of reporting and allow our customers to do the kind of reporting and compliance that seems to be sort of ever evolving, right, in this space. And so this is, everything starts with data, and we need to build our products, we need to build our solutions fit for purpose.
That's great, Denise. Thank you. I mean, I love that slide, by the way. I think it drives home a couple of points. It drives home the fact that the answer is data driven, which means it's reliable and trustworthy, and there's no sort of emotion in it. It's all factual, and that's great overall. But the graphic also it sets out very clearly the energy metrics, including cost, that are impacted by sustainability overall. So I love that graphic. Now, Logicalis wants to be the sustainable IT partner of choice for our clients, and our partnership with you guys at Cisco, particularly our Cisco environmental specializations, which we have in 15 countries, I think it is now. That's really helped us stay educated on what's available from Cisco for us, but obviously also for our clients. Things like your take back program, where we can help customers avoid e-waste, and the sustainability estimator and the product carbon footprint data that we mentioned earlier that we have access to. That's also helped us and our clients make data-driven decisions about their IT environment. Let me try and bring that to life, if that's okay, with a real life example. We work with clients all over the world, but we very recently worked with a UK-based customer in the food industry, where we were able to guide them on the carbon savings of their IT network refresh project, in addition to the network design aspects. So as they signed the project off, they were able to view the projected energy, cost, and carbon savings that they could make moving forward. And in addition to that, we also installed a Meraki smart power monitor in their environment. And that will mean that the customer will be able to save thousands of miles in engineering travel costs per year as well. And that's really, honestly, game changing for our clients around the world. It really helps them in their role, particularly in the IT function, as transformation leaders in the journey towards sustainable IT. Now, Logicalis does a survey of CIOs, IT leaders every year. In fact, we just completed our 10th anniversary report, which surveyed over 1,000 IT leaders across the globe. So as a consequence, you can imagine the findings are pretty robust, and they're a good indicator for what's really happening on the ground, wherever you may be based in the world, because the sample is from over 1,000 IT leaders across the world.
Yeah.
And in that survey, get this, almost 100%, so almost all respondents said that IT had taken a leading role in their organization's sustainability planning and target setting, which is a great indicator for organizations starting to address this. They've already started creating plans and setting targets. That's a great first step. And also, a massive 93% said that they think that IT is going to be core to the success of their organization's sustainability goals. So it's kind of validating that we're on the right track here and that organizations are actually trying to address the challenge.
Yeah.
But I'm interested specifically, Denise, in your thoughts on this, on the role that the IT leader can take to transform their organization's efforts in this space, and how they can sort of spearhead that transformation, which is demanded by their bosses and by their organization's employees and customers and so on. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I'll take my thoughts and then I'll like you kind of bring in some real world examples, because I think so much of that is what brings this to life. The neat thing about a lot of the IT leaders I meet with around the world is secretly, most of them have a green heart. Like, they want to solve problems. And when they are designing infrastructure and they realize how hot those rooms get, or how high those air conditioning bills are, when heat waves are coming, and they are looking at monitoring, they can see those energy costs going through the roof. And then you have brownouts and you have blackouts. Like I said, here in Silicon Valley, we are going through a heat wave right now and experiencing that. And so your data points underpin, and I can put a punctuation mark and an exclamation point right next to it that says, I am actively seeing IT raising their hand and saying, we need visibility across everything that we're turning on. And we need to connect it with data. We need to understand where this power is going. And we need to simply turn those things off that we aren't using and we aren't needing. So let's take the campus, for example. We talked about real estate, and here in the States alone, I think there's some wild number, like $2.7 trillion that are coming up for refinancing in the next 36 months alone. In the EU, we know there are a lot of buildings that are much older, right? And that are absolutely due for energy efficiency upgrades. So policy and regulation is coming in to say, hey, we need energy efficiency to come up in all these buildings. Well, how do you do that at scale? Ultimately, technology can provide that backbone in the campus to connect all of those different systems. Building management systems are in the dozens for every building, and oftentimes they're not connected to one another. So the more we can understand how sustainability data is growing in its importance and reading off all these different stakeholders, you're exactly right, where IT plays this very, very important role. And we're seeing that not just from the reporting compliance side, but in the operationalization and the planning side. So data is critical. We're seeing that. Then you go over to the data center side, right? And no surprise that you may or may not know the numbers. If you were to do a general sort of AI, OpenAI type of search, or ChatGPT search, it uses 850% more power than a simple internet search. Can you imagine just the scale of what that does to data centers around the world? So the industry is scrambling to figure out, how do we do better solutions at cooling, at power distribution, at building the right kinds of data centers that can sustain the amount of compute power needed for AI. The same solutions won't work. It's not a linear model anymore. It breaks. In fact, chips that are coming on the roadmaps can no longer be air cooled. So we have to look at new solutions. And it's this variety of stakeholders that are coming to the table, trying to figure out how we think about new solutions together, and where these ecosystems need to operate differently. We need to break down those silos. But as we've said, it all starts with measurement of data and understanding that baseline. And so, when I think of where Logicalis is at, I think it's more than fair to say IT is leading this journey. Where else are you seeing this come to life for customers in your patch?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned the word journey there. That's absolutely the word I would use there. And it's complex. And so to help our clients around the world, we've developed a sustainable IT customer journey, if you like, to help leaders get to where they need to go to by following sort of 4 key steps. And these are educate, evaluate, navigate, and mitigate. So let me just take a few moments, Denise, to walk our audience through these because we're partnering with Cisco in every single one of these aspects. So the educate phase is about understanding the scope of the sustainability problem in IT and our roles as leaders in addressing it. You mentioned regulation earlier that's driving change in this space. And so in this education phase, you need to understand not only things like terminology that's used in this space, acronyms and so on, but actually what regulation is asking you to do, because it's not just reporting, it's also driving action. You know, you referred a couple of times to real estate, and you mentioned the EU regulation on that, but that's the new EU regulation on buildings governs greenhouse gas emissions, and there's a binding target on EU countries to reduce those emissions by 60% that come from buildings by 2030. So massive amount of work required to be done there. And if you're not educated about that, you won't know about it, and therefore you won't also have this ability to comply. So it's critical, this education piece, to understanding not just terminology, but also expectations on your organization from country legislators, if you like. Then there's the evaluate phase. That's all about helping customers get a handle on their carbon emissions in their IT environment today. We've spoken quite a bit about that already so far in this webinar. But for example, that's using the sustainability estimator tool that you developed at Cisco. It's a really great help in understanding what your footprint is today on a sort of live basis. And then you move into the navigate phase. And that's where we work with our clients to redesign the IT architecture with sustainability right at the core of that redesign, so that as your network or data centers come to end of life, we'll design the new one to be significantly more energy efficient. And I'll go back to that customer example that I shared earlier in a moment with more details on how we've helped them become more energy efficient. But the final phase is mitigate, and that's ensuring that we build a sustainable approach and circularity into our clients' IT life cycles. And in this, we're helping to mitigate the impacts of e-waste and reduce future carbon consumption over time using things like Cisco's take back and refresh programs, the key elements to that. So let me talk about that customer example at a moment. There's a lot of demand for this topic, right? And it's early days still, but I can bring it to life with a real customer case study with real life data. I mentioned earlier that we've been working with a leading UK fresh food supplier, and they wanted to upgrade their network, but they also wanted to make sure that the project was contributing to their goal to become net zero by 2050. And we followed the 4-step methodology that I outlined earlier, and it works. And so we help them evaluate the carbon in their current environment using those tools that I mentioned earlier to give them the sort of benchmark for their CO2 measure. And then we help them navigate to a more carbon and cost efficient network using Cisco Meraki. And then with Cisco's take back program, we've also helped them to mitigate e-waste by ensuring that the old network devices are recycled or remanufactured, avoiding the e-waste problem that I shared earlier. So all up, customer journey we took them on is projected to deliver, and this is just phase 1 alone, which is just on a quarter of their IT environment. This is expected to deliver a 6.5% reduction in devices, which is great for the embedded carbon that the customer consumes. Also, a reduction of 15% in their annual energy cost, which is a great saving for them, really impacts the bottom line. And there's no shame in associating sustainability measures with cost reduction activities because there's a clear link, as I mentioned earlier. 7.7 metric tons of CO2 avoided, again, just in a quarter of their environment overall. So you can do the maths and sort of gross that up yourself to come to a more meaningful amount of metric tons of CO2 that would be avoided if this was extrapolated across their entire IT environment. And the carbon savings from Cisco's take-back program have delivered, 99.9% of the decommissioned devices being reused or remanufactured. So there's some clear outcomes here that have a sustainability focus in mind, but also lead to great impacts to the organization's bottom line. And this doesn't even include additional savings that client got from reduced IT engineer travel, for example. Now, the important thing in all this, Denise, is that, and we've said this many times already, in this webinar today, that this was an insights-led, data-driven approach. It's really critical to say that, because all of the findings up front were reliable in terms of our estimates of those savings, because it was data-driven overall. It was supported by Cisco every step of the way. And this is really helping to differentiate our conversations with customers by focusing on those actual, tangible sustainability benefits. So, look, I wanted to thank you, Denise. Logicalis, our clients, are all really grateful for the work that you and your team are doing to provide the data and the tools that inform all of that work. So thank you for that. Now,
No, yeah. Thank you for being such a great partner.
oh, no problem at all. It's almost time to wrap up, Denise. So can I ask you, what final words of advice could you share with our audience on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing you go through that journey with those tangible examples really brings all of this to life, and it is circular in nature and how we all need to work together. And the couple of things I would leave the audience with, really, the first one is what you just brought to life, which is treat sustainability as a business driver. Right. While the education, the first couple of years, we knew each other, was around education, and it still largely, it starts with education. It is not only a regulation and reporting mechanism, but it is a business driver. And we know that what's good for the planet is actually good for business. And the numbers and the stats and the survey are all pointing towards technology can help pave that way. The second is, how do you increase that visibility at the energy management layer across the board? So in order for you to be able to state those numbers and the benefits that you've seen in that customer, it needed a baseline. And that requirement of enhancing visibility at the energy management layer across all devices, across every architecture, is another starting point. And then last but not least, something like over half of the planet's population was going through an election year in something like a year and a half, and I know ours is coming up soon. And so the ask is, how do you keep an eye on the changes in regulation and policy? Because in many places around the world, the government is actually helping on both sides to subsidize, as well as give people sort of the blueprints of where to go, whether that's energy efficiency or the right tools and technology to use. But those would be the three I would leave people with. I think your framework on the journey that we're on was perfect, to start with education and get all the way to the process of how do you mitigate and take action. But please remember that sustainability is also a business driver, and we need to see and know where we're starting to measure from, and then keep an eye on those regulations.
Well, thanks for that, Denise. Those are great insights for everybody. And I want to reinforce that point that, again, sustainability is also a profit driver. I'll come back to that in a second. I'd just like to add a few closing words myself. We've mentioned getting yourself educated several times on this, and you can do that through trustworthy sources like IDC or Gartner. Logicalis, we've also got a variety of sources that people can access, and I just want to put that out there for people if they want to, educate themselves more on this topic. The Logicalis CIO survey, which you can download from our website, gives tons of statistics on CIO sustainability efforts, in amongst thoughts on artificial intelligence and cybersecurity and IoT and P5G and all those things. There's a big sustainability focus this year in the report. And we've also recently launched Green Bytes, which is our sustainable IT update on LinkedIn, along with this webinar series. So that's good. The other thing I'd also want to emphasize is that it's really important to collaborate in this space. I don't want anybody to go out there and try to reinvent the wheel on this. Lots of organizations have started this journey and have gone through the highs and the lows overall. And the problems with sustainability are pretty complex, right, and far-reaching. And I don't think any one organization is able to solve it by themselves. We've got a nice ecosystem and support group ourselves. Denise, you mentioned that earlier, from a brains trust in the smart buildings project that we've been working on. But bringing those individuals together has shown to me the power of having more perspectives in the room, and also the power of learning from others that have been through this already. So it's really important to collaborate. And then finally, I'd really recommend that everyone embraces circularity. I discussed earlier that the ICT sector has a massive challenge related to its share of global emissions, but there's a huge business opportunity by deploying a circular economy model. According to Boston Consulting Group, the transition to a circular economy has the potential to unlock $4.5 trillion of business by 2030. And again, there's no shame in recognizing that there's top and bottom line benefit to embracing this greener business model. How do you do that? It's easy. You can mitigate e-waste by working with a partner like Logicalis that can support ethical recycling. You can use remanufactured products as part of your solution design, and you can access partner programs such as Cisco Take Back and GreenPay. Talk to Logicalis or Cisco if you want more details on this sort of stuff. Okay. Well, wow, that half an hour flew by. So thanks for that, Denise. The audience have been asking questions on the LinkedIn forum, and some of them have been answered by our teams that are supporting us for this call today. We've got a couple of questions that we're going to take live in a moment, so we'll see what comes up in our screen. But before we move to Q&A, I'd just like to encourage the audience as well with one final thing, to share their sustainability successes. As industry leaders, everyone on this call, this webinar, you've all got a voice and a platform to speak out for change. And it's important that you share successes, but challenges are really important to share as well, and your future sustainability plans, because that will encourage others to move forward on this path as well. All right, so let's move into the Q&A then. So could the first question flash up on screen? Okay, it's come from Anonymous. All right, how do organizations balance AI and sustainability? Let me say a couple of words on this, Denise, before I hand over to you, if that's okay. Give you a chance to think on the hoof what your response might be. But I'm asked this question frequently, and there are three bits of practical advice that I always give in response to this. And the first one is that the data utilization consequences of AI, as you touched on earlier in the webinar, they're going to be significant. And that's a big driver of that growth in emissions as we look forward to 2040. But my advice to everybody is don't let that stop you dealing with what you can do today in this space. It's not a hopeless task. And if we can all focus on the controllable items that are in front of us today and not get lost in the fact that AI will have a significant impact on emissions, that's the challenge that we can sort of address immediately today. The second bit of advice that I give to people when they ask me that question, or the response that I give, is that you'd be amazed about the impact that simple policy can have on human behavior. And so the governance around how your organization uses AI and how your organization deals with things like data storage and so on, that can make a big difference to the impact that AI will have on emissions going forward. And the final bit that I would say, and this is not I can't claim any credit in thinking this one up, but personal accountability is really important here. Anthony Levy, who's the founder of an organization called Circularity IT, based in the UK, is an inspirational leader in this space. He talks about acting deliberately when it comes to IT usage. Stop sending cat videos and start being purposeful with how you use data and so on. I think that very sort of deliberate approach will really be very helpful in this data-driven utilization approach that AI will bring from an emissions perspective going forward. So that's what I would say in response to this. I don't know, what thoughts do you have, Denise?
Yeah, so I would break mine, and a lot of it echoes, but on the one hand, if you are in the process of building out infrastructure, be very purposeful about what you're putting in so that you're trying to future-proof your investments, whether it's how you're selecting vendor, how you're giving back that old equipment, how are you making space for rack density that we know are going up and to the right faster than we know how to build it. And so I think it's really important in the hardware infrastructure side of AI that you're thoughtful and that you're partnering with the right vendors. On the other side, AI and the tools and the data available that's out there, everything from creating digital twins, it's kind of fascinating what AI can do from a problem solving standpoint and sustainability. So, we can actually leverage AI to help solve a lot of those problems, but in the same way that you mentioned, we have to be thoughtful and responsible about it. And how you use and deploy AI is incredibly important right now, whether it's policy that we're going to lean on or our own just education of how you're using AI and how you are thoughtful in your planning and proportional in your designs and the application and the use of AI tools. So early stages, I'm actually really excited about all of it. It's a lot of change, but like anything, you need to be pragmatic and responsible about it.
Great, thank you. Good answer, thanks. Let's have a look at the next question. This is for you, Denise. I think, how is Cisco working to reduce embedded carbon in devices moving forward? Good
Yeah.
question.
So at Cisco, within Scope 3, like many companies, it's the hardest part to measure. In fact, ours is a little in the low 20s in terms of the actual embedded carbon. And that has everything to do with the materials we use. We have eliminated lead and oil paint in all of our products a long time ago. We are minimizing foam-based packaging. And so it goes back to that circular design principles we have across all of our products. So any new product going out, you can be rest assured that it's followed this circular design kind of checklist process. Now, with all of that, we have to be thoughtful and pragmatic about how we are decoupling and minimizing products and shipping and transport. But it's actually one of those things many of our customers ask Cisco, how are you doing this? And what can we learn? You mentioned, the journey that we're all on. We often talk about how we're all on this journey together. And I would simply say in this space in particular, the entire industry is on this journey, from supply chain to transport to packaging. And there are new developments and new materials and innovations coming out every day that we all have to learn from. That list of materiality and what I often call the naughty list of what we don't want in products anymore, that list continues to grow as we learn about products and materials, that aren't great for the environment. And so we all have to be vigilant and continue the education and awareness, but build those into the larger process. And that's, again, one of the great things about Cisco supply chain is we know how to do that.
Great, thank you. All right, great answer, thank you. Let's have a look at the next question. With the IT industry hooked on revenues from short refresh cycles, how do partners like Logicalis plan to move away from that? Okay, well, this is obviously one that I'll address then. Yeah, I mean, refresh cycles are a key part of the revenue drivers for partners and the whole industry. Let's not pretend anything other than that. And I think that refresh, the supply of new equipment, if you like, that's going to be a part of the industry for some time to come. And there's no getting away from it. As organizations grow and expand, they're going to need to expand the amount of kit that they have overall. But to answer this question more specifically, I would say that we're committed to delivering the outcomes that our clients want. And in the area of sustainability, that could mean providing high quality remanufactured options to complement new items. And I know that Cisco is working really hard to develop its remanufactured program there as well, to complement the sale of new devices too. But as well, in addition to that, it's also about giving advice to our clients on extending the life of assets where appropriate. We've had many customers come to us to look at their policy environment, again, back to that sort of impact on human behavior. And they have, silly policies in place that have, a laptop refresh every 2 years. So simple things like extending that to every 3, 4, or 5 years, that's a great way of reducing the embedded carbon of new devices, because the longer you use the devices for, the more you get out of them, the less you need to buy new. So it's a combination of all those things that come together, but we've always put our clients' needs first. And even if that means that we forego some revenue, because it's the best way, I think, to increase trust with our clients and deepen the relationship from a longer term perspective if you put their needs first all the time. So that's how we try to deal with this demand for new products versus remanufactured versus extending the life. It's based on what our clients need and what they instruct us to do, but we always give them that advice up front, give them the optionality, if you like, up front. Okay, we've probably got time for one more question, so let's have a look at the next question then. Okay, do you see regional differences in preparing for sustainability carbon accounting? Okay, I've got a couple of thoughts on this, Denise, then I'll hand it over to you. Many territories are quite advanced in this space because it's been driven by regulation to a certain extent. if I think about the EU and other parts of the world, they've been very progressive in terms of the regulations they've introduced to try to drive people to address the topic. But I would say that's not really an indication that other territories aren't addressing it. And, we've referred to this point several times in this webinar, Denise, that there is top line and bottom line benefit to be made by addressing sustainability as a business topic, not just as a compliance topic, if you like, overall. And I think that's what will push organizations forward that have been perhaps slow to adopt because the regulation isn't there or because it's another thing on their to-do list. Once they see their customers and their employees and their shareholders actually demanding action in this space, is better for the bottom line. I think that's what will drive things forward. But what do you think?
Yeah, for those who are familiar with scope accounting, I do appreciate that over the last couple of years, there have been more and more standardization on just the measurement of scopes 1 and 2, which are the indirect and direct operations of any given business, right? But when you start to get to scope 3 and that end-to-end value chain, and how do you measure everything from the use of that product and its useful life, right? For Cisco, that's 5 years of product. To transport and business travel, it's a lot harder to measure, especially when you dig deep into that supply chain. And so I'm grateful for scope accounting in the sense that it allows all of us to have a base level of understanding. And then everything you said is spot on. Companies need to now interpret for their own purposes. How do they translate for their bottom line and their top line growth? How they're going to embed and incorporate sustainability into their business practices, because not only government and regulations are demanding it, stakeholders and shareholders are demanding it. And I think when you bring that all together, it's just the right thing to do. And it's a good problem to solve, but it requires all of us.
Yeah, that's great. Denise, thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And to your team as well, and everyone at Cisco for the partnership in accelerating sustainability in IT. The work that we're doing together, I think, is going to have a real impact in the industry. And I'm really excited to be part of it with you. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for being such a great partner. I enjoy continuing this conversation.
Thanks to our audience for listening today. If you asked a question that we didn't respond to in the webinar, please rest assured that we'll respond to it in the LinkedIn comments section of this piece. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for listening, and good luck with your sustainability journey.